All right. So, hello, everyone, and welcome. Shelley and I are super excited to have you here this evening, this afternoon. Um, the first thing I wanted to do is go over a few housekeeping items. First of all, let me introduce myself. I'm Michael Knouse. For those of you who don't know me, Shelley, introduce yourself.
I'm Shelley Hawkins.
All right. And we're going to tell you a little bit more about who we are and why we're working together in just a little bit. But first of all, wanted to let you know that this webinar is slated for an hour, and we'll probably go over a little bit, maybe more like an hour and 15, somewhere in there. Um, we're really just going to do our best to give you the most value and
Yeah.
strategies tonight. And if that goes over an hour, that's what we'll do to make sure that we get everything across that we want to.
You can probably
Um,
plan for about 75 minutes, to make sure that we get the Q&A in, just so people
yeah.
know. Yeah.
Cool. So first of all, to start things off too, we're using this tool called GoToWebinar, which is a really great tool. And you all should have a console on your desktop that allows you to make comments, ask questions, and that sort of thing. So the first thing I want to do is just do a little test here. I want to ask people to just try using the console. So type in where there's a spot to type your message, and just say hi to Michael or Shelley. Just give us some indication that you're out there, or raise your hand or something like that so that we know you're familiar with at least like where the console is and that you have some capability to do some things with it. Okay, I see two, three, four. Okay, I see some people responding. That's good. All right, cool. All right, so I see that people seem to have the hang of asking questions and raising hands and that sort of thing. Great. All right. So also we're gonna take questions, but we want to leave all questions until the end because we want to cover our information and then give people a chance to interact with us and answer any questions that you may have. So first of all, we want to start out with kind of who are we? We're here with this webinar, Raising the Bar, Reinventing Your Wholehearted Work in the World. To give you a little bit of background, for myself, I'm Michael Naus. I live in Portland, Oregon, and I'm a startup coach. And I run a web show and a podcast called The Startup Sessions at thestartupsessions.com. And my primary audience right now is I work with burnout employees and I show them how to test and validate and launch their creative ideas into the world. And I used to be a corporate 9 to 5er not that long ago. In August, I stopped selling technology software solutions to corporate clients, where I was spending a lot of time on airplanes and in hotels. And I've shifted to doing this work full time now. And I'm super excited about that, that I get to really do something that I feel is meaningful and a reflection of the work that I want to do right now. But about 5 years ago, I went through a time where everything kind of seemed like it came crashing down around me. And I had some huge financial struggles and some work struggles. And I just had a lot of stuff going on. And that all happened within a few short months. And luckily at that time, I sought out the help of a coach. And that coach that really helped me get through some of those tough times and helped me develop my my work in the world that I'm offering now is on the call with us, is Shelley. And so I'm super excited to be doing this webinar with her here today. I'm still a work in progress, very much so, and I always will be. And
We
but
always.
I've really learned how to navigate my life with more clarity and ease, and really have reinvented the way that I offer my work in the world, especially over the course of the last year. And so that's primarily what I'm going to share with you from that perspective of how I reinvented my work in the world and some of the strategies that I used along the way to do that. So, with that, Shelley, tell us tell us about yourself and give us an intro.
Well, I'm Shelley Hawkins, and I'm an intuitive business coach and a writer. And I recently became a best-selling author last year in an anthology with 20 other women. And I've been in business for 10 years. And my clientele, I got a tap on the shoulder a few years ago that I really needed to take my business in the direction of working with people in business and entrepreneurs, visionaries, pioneers, leaders, creatives, and this is my audience, people who are um, oftentimes pretty organic mavericks finding their way in a pretty unique way in their business. And I'm here to help help people free their brilliance into what they're here to do, and in a pretty conscious and organic way of doing business. And business is one of our primary ways of being able to express our brilliance and our uniquenesses, and create meaning in the world, and do it profitably. And that's what brings me to this work, and that's why I love it.
Cool. Thank you, Shelley. So
Mhm.
why are we doing this webinar and why are we working together? Well, I already alluded to the fact that I began working with Shelley a few years ago, and we connected a few months ago, and I specifically sought out Shelley and said, you know what, I've got some clients, some of my coaching clients that are just struggling with things. And people were pushing really hard against trying to make some things happen, and they were getting frustrated and tired of repeating some of these same old patterns. So I reached out to Shelley and I said, you know, what can we create that would offer my clients a way to move through this process of reinventing themselves in their world of work where they and kind of get past the places that they're getting stuck. And then
Mhm.
and then in talking with Shelley, we also both realized for ourselves that we had moved through similar cycles to significantly reinvent aspects of our lives and our work world. And then we started just kind of brainstorming and thinking about, this cycle and everything that seemed to like really come together and make sense. And and I started using this with some of my clients. And when I started going through this, what we call the cycle of reinvention, my clients really began to get clarity about where they were. So they knew, for example, when they should be pushing forward with their ideas versus when they should be just kind of letting things marinate. So we're excited to go through this cycle of reinvention, and I hope everyone's going to get a lot out of it. But that's primarily from my perspective, what we're going to cover, and why we're working together is I've worked with Shelley for a long time, and I consider her a master at what she does. So I wanted to partner with her to bring this to my clients, and fortunately, we're able to bring it to I think both of our clients.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So
very much so.
go ahead, Shelley.
It's across the board from startups to being in business for 30 years. I mean, if you're trying to leave the corporate world and anything in between, because you're going to find nuances in here that relate and some that don't, but there's a general progression that everyone makes in the process of reinvention, and it's so much easier. And if you can figure out where you are and walk through it pretty consciously.
Yes, and I'm speaking from experience because I was Shelley's client, and so she worked with me for a long time.
Mm.
Um, and the way that I was able to navigate the past year compared to how I would have done it 5 years ago or 4 years ago, even or even 3 years ago, is dramatically different.
Yeah.
So I'm going to move the slide along here, and I'm going
Yeah,
to
let's
share.
dive in.
What's that, Shelley?
I said, yeah, let's dive in.
Yeah. So our goals for today are really threefold. One is to have you come away knowing exactly where you are within this cycle of reinvention in your work. Because when you know where you are, then you can know what steps to take to move forward. The second thing is really to know what steps to take to move forward in this cycle and move towards your wholehearted work in the world. And then the
Hmm.
third, Shelley and I are going to talk about an opportunity to fully embrace this process of reinventing your work in the world at the towards the end of the webinar today.
Hmm.
All right. So the cycle of reinvention that we're going to talk about here is made up of 5 phases. The first one is dying and letting go. The second one is finding your feet. The third one is a life reimagined. The fourth is reforming and making it real. And the fifth is embracing the flow. And this whole process of reinvention is, to me, it's as more the more that I think about this, the more that it's about really embracing the natural rhythm of things rather than trying to force them. Because I'm a guy, I came from the corporate world, and my default mode is to push, push, push. And sometimes it doesn't make sense to do that. And in fact, it actually hinders the process of moving forward, especially in any entrepreneurial type of journeys. So, what I found with my clients is most people tend to push when they should be letting their foot off the gas. And then by the time it's time to put the pedal down, they're either too tired or demoralized to push. So the key is really to understand how to thrive within this model and understand when to do what. So the way that we're going to work this is Shelly and I are going to both give input as to what worked for us in these different phases. And I'm going to talk about the first one here, the phase one, the dying and letting go phase. So, in the cycle of reinvention, dying and letting go is a phase that is probably the scariest because we aren't taught to expect it. And it's really that time when, for myself, um, when I had when I lost a job just recently in August, I felt like I was kind of losing my identity because when you work 8 to 10 hours a day in a corporate job and that goes away, it's like a piece of yourself. That's what it felt like for me, kind of disappeared. And I was kind of left between the old world that I knew and this new world that I wanted to form. So I kind of felt formless. And most people fight like crazy to keep their identities from dissolving. Most people, like I thought, this is just a blip, things will return back to the way they were. Um, but when reinvention is truly happening in your life, whether we think we've asked for it or not, we tend to have many of these dissolving experiences like jobs disappearing or relationships or friends disappearing that no longer serve us. So we may
Mhm.
feel that everything is falling apart and that we're losing certain things that used to feel certain to us. So for
Mhm.
me, like I often like my first thing, like when I lost that job, was I started to wonder, what did I do wrong? And I started to feel like a failure because dissolving really does feel like death because it is. It's really the demise of, in many ways, the person that you have been,
Mhm.
and you're waiting to become this person that's going to embrace, in this case, a new kind of work in your life.
Mhm.
Um, so I was in this job that I just mentioned for 4 years, and it was the job that I'd created very intentionally. And so it gave me some flexibility. It paid me well, and when it was gone, I just felt like a piece of me had kind of like melted away also. Um, and when I decided to pursue this work full time, it literally felt like my corporate self was dissolving and dying. And so I had to let go of that. And in this phase, something important to know is that, only your grasp on what you think is supposed to happen will block you from going forward to that next step. And if you let it kind of just let things go in this phase, you can move on to the next phase really easy and naturally. But it took me a long time to figure that out. Because when we're dissolving something and letting things go, a lot of us tend to we fight our feelings and we try to recapture our former lives or jump immediately into some new status quo, like getting another job just like the one that we had, even though we didn't like it. Or maybe if we just left a relationship, that's what a rebound romance might look like. Those are classic examples. And all these things do is slow us down and keep us in this phase one and make the whole process more painful than it needs to be. And I've done that many times. So, as far as what to do in this phase and how to move through it with ease, as at least as much ease as you possibly can, is I've listed some tips on the slides here. Is literally just like slow down and live one day or even 10 minutes at a time. Slow down and really focus your attention on whatever's happening right now. Get present and drop in. Because in this phase, a lot of worry tends to come up. It did for me. I was worrying about where my income was going to come from next and how I was going to make this transition to doing something that I really wanted to do. And when I've dropped in to just living for the moment and noticing little things around me, like my dog or support that I was receiving from a loved one, or even something as simple as the sun hitting my skin, it really allowed me to get out of worry and get really focused on what's happening right now. Another thing that's important to do in this phase is taking care of yourself in physical ways. And that might look like different things for different people. But for me, it looks like taking a walk in nature, going to a yoga class, having my favorite coffee or tea, just really caring for my physical self in this phase. This phase is more about just letting this process unfold rather than trying to force things to happen. Shelley, how about you?
Hmm.
What are some things that you have done in this phase in terms of moving through it?
Yeah, well, I second everything that you've said. And a few things that I'd add. I look at the phase one time as like the fasten your seatbelt time because this is probably going to hurt.
Yeah.
and uh, and that it can be very simple anywhere on the continuum from very simple to kind of dramatic actually. And if you can just allow that to be so, it makes it a lot easier because our world we have lots of you hear a lot of comments about people being dramatic, and there's a time for everything. Drama has a place because it's gonna feel chaotic likely. And the best ways to move through it are actually counterintuitive, like you said, because we're taught to expect of ourselves, and what's expected of us from others are to get our hustle on, um, you know to push through to make it happen, and that's how that can be our first response. But how you're in reinvention is when that absolutely won't work. It doesn't matter what you try to put together, and you and I both know that. It will it just you can be successful that way, but it's going to cost you a lot of energy and personal resources. And what our goal, Michael and my goals are, at least one of them for this, is to be able to, for you to be able to do this with um, some level of greater ease, to go through it as awake as you can and make different kinds of choices. Because the more you can, settle in for the ride and be present to it, the better it will go, and more likely the faster it will go. Um, and a client of my clients experience that all the time, with especially most of them are walking through business reinventions. And what's happening, they don't come thinking, well, I got to reinvent my business. They come thinking, I want to increase my revenue, I need to do this, that, and another thing to get my business amped up, or how do I become more creative? I don't understand what's going on. And oftentimes what's happening is the original motivation and inspiration for being in business is no longer a reality, even though they haven't realized it yet. And so I work a lot with energy, and we're in the process of coaching. And so people are dissolving old habits of perception. They're dissolving old um, wounds and ways of being and who they've been, and shedding that to walk into so that who they really are can emerge, and then they can bring that into their work. So you can feel paralyzed. For me, and I know for others, it feels like even if you've been a very visionary kind of person, like the vision just goes away, and it's a cleaning the slate kind of time, and relationships change, and like I said, it can be pretty counterintuitive. So some things I did, like you said, is release the push, of course, and that's advising my clients to do the same. Getting present is huge, and mindfulness is quite the movement. It's growing as a movement nowadays, and there's a lot of misconceptions around the idea of meditation. And I was, all it is really is just a dropping in. It's not so much of having to control your thoughts. And I heard a speaker recently, a French guy in the tech world, at a conference I went to called Wisdom 2.0, and he was talking about the change that dropping in, just this mindfulness idea of moving your attention from your head down into your body, and sitting in silence, simple as sitting in silence for a few moments a day. And he would have called it the whole thing BS a year ago. And he was standing on the stage to say, that's exactly what he thought of it a year ago, and that it had totally changed his life. And in this phase one, it's oftentimes a cocooning. You're craving silence, even if you resist the silence. Solitude, those kinds of things where you're dropping in, really move you through to prepare you for phase two. And also, I would second what you said about nature and listening to your body. Nietzsche said there's more wisdom in your body than in your deepest philosophies. And so if you're willing to listen to your body, and get present to that, you'll gain a lot of wisdom for moving through. And then lastly, for me, play is always involved in one way or another. And Stuart Brown has a book called Play that looks backwards in the screen, but he talks about different versions of play. And for me, I'm number one kinesthetic, so I got to move. And in the different phases, that movement takes different evolutions. But it may be yoga, it may be running, it may be strength training, it may be hiking and sprinting. And so finding what works for you, exploring all of those are things I did to move through phase one, as well as my clients.
Yeah. A couple other things that I did in phase one where I talked to others that I trusted. Shelley, that's when
Mm-hmm.
I reached out to you. We were coaching when I was going through a couple of phases of reinvention in my work. And if you don't have a wise friend or relative that you really trust, a good coach can be an amazing source of reassurance. And when I was going through a big
Mm-hmm.
reinvention 5 years ago in my work and other aspects of my life, um, it just helped me understand by talking to other people that I trusted that I was going to
Mm-hmm.
make it through this thing alive. Because when you're in this phase of dying and letting go, like completely letting go of
Mm-hmm.
an old way of work to get ready for a new one, you want
Mm-hmm.
to you want to be reassured that you're going to be able to make it. And so that's another important thing that I did. And then a big one for me too, the last point is letting yourself grieve. Um, because the bottom line is even if you're leaving an unpleasant situation like a bad job or you got fired or you got your wife or your husband left you or something like that and it
Mm-hmm.
was a bad situation and technically it's like should be a good time because that bad situation has now corrected itself, there's still loss. And so
Mm-hmm.
anytime there's loss, there's going to be emotions of denial and anger and sadness and just experiencing these feelings and then letting them go and letting them pass through is uh, is some advice that I would give anybody in this phase because
Yeah.
I'm it's not the first and easiest thing for me to let myself be emotional and feel stuff, but in this phase, it's important. So
Yeah.
if you think that the things in this phase sound frustratingly passive in nature, you're you're right. These are not action oriented things for the most part. And an important key to understand is that dissolving is not something that you do. It's something that happens to you and for you. So you can't push it. It's all about surrender in this phase.
Mm-hmm.
And really, the closest that you'll come to controlling this phase is just relaxing, doing some of these steps, and trusting the process. And
Mm-hmm.
then signs that you'll know that you're starting to leave this dying and letting go phase are flickers of calm. You'll start to feel this ease about life or this ease about your work situation. And you'll probably also start, maybe doing things that you never thought you'd do. Um, this is when I was in this phase when I started doing yoga for the first time. I'd never done yoga before, and I started
Mm-hmm.
doing yoga for the first time just because it felt like something that would allow me to move and kind of be a new reinvention of myself.
Yeah.
So that's that's what I'm going to end with phase one. Unless Shelley's got any other points, we'll move to phase two.
The only other thing I would add that's really important about phase one, I'll make that two things actually. One is just focus on doing what's in front of you. This isn't the time, like you're saying, it feels passive because it's about surrender, but surrender is really one of the most powerful things you can do. It's a willful choice, and so it's getting present with doing, just do what's in front of you. Don't be reaching out in these big accomplishments for big accomplishments. It's time to get present and let this thing move through you, because you get to be more of who you are on the other end, I promise. And and then the second thing is you were talking about seeking out wisdom, and I think when you're moving in reinvention, it's really powerful to seek out new wisdom. I know that was for me. I just found like I found myself going to some different kinds of books, different kinds of um, meeting new people that I trusted. Different kind of wisdom started coming in because I was heading for a new journey.
Yeah.
So that's what I would add. And I'll just step right into phase two. And since that's mine to volley here. So phase two is called finding your feet. And it's the time of, Michael has several points up there, as far as what to do. It's a time of really falling in love with space, because dying has been a time of cleaning the slate. Relationships are changing, like, if your reinvention has something to do with divorce, or you've left a job, or you've been laid off, or something has taken place, there's going to be space in your life, because what has been is moving out in one way or another, and you're changing. So your best, most powerful choice to begin with is to fall in love with space. And an example is a client of mine. She was in the process of really reinventing her work, and yeah, she had come in, with all these goals about revenue and so forth, but what she realized was that her she really wanted to change how her expression came through, and she was frustrated. Things were kind of falling apart. There was no way that she could get things moving. And we were working through this process, okay, it's time for you to really let there be space. And her reaction had been in life up till that time of compulsively filling it. She didn't want to be alone. She had, if the clients started dwindling, she started hustling for clients, and finding ways to make it happen. But what that got her was maybe a new improved version of the same thing that she'd had. So as she learned to play with space and have the courage of this, then her, some of the old clients started moving away, and new clients started moving in, the ones she really wanted. So instead of burning herself out on maybe the people that weren't resonant with her as much anymore, new ones started moving in, and she started connecting with herself. Her primary relationship was changing, her business was changing, and that's what takes place when you fall in love with that space. So there are other ways that you might have an impulse to fill it, is to go get another degree. Like I said, hustle for clients, depending on what your work is. Avoid being alone. And that's not to say that going and getting a job, after, in the process of reinvention, it couldn't be the right thing for you, because it could be. It has to do with your mindset of what you take it in for. And if it can cradle you as you move across this desert, so to speak, into your new world, that's great. Just make sure that you're choosing it for that purpose. So letting go of the impulse to fill up the space, and so that it's not leading you into more of the same, and you actually get to change orbits. And I want to reemphasize that point, is that the reinvention that Michael and I are talking about in these phases is not about creating a new and improved version of who and where you've been. It's really about changing orbits, like an electron, moves when it disappears eventually from one orbit when it gains enough energy, and reappears in another orbit. And that's the kind of reinvention that we're talking about. So things to do, both for my clients and for myself, is trust what comes to you. That thought's pretty powerful. We tend to focus on the idea that our thoughts and our feelings and that kind of thing are how we form and shape our life and participate in life and bring in what we want to. And the power of this is that, and the wonder of this reinvention process, and I found it just astounding sometimes, is that goodness comes to you no matter what, because there's something in motion that it's falling apart for a reason, to take you to a new place. And so trust in that. Grief may still be happening. It's a great, powerful cleanser, way to clean the slate. So trust it. And again, nature in phase two, where you're finding your feet, um, you're also going to find that your environment starts to take on a premium. So you might find things like, I think Michael and I both experienced this, and definitely clients, where noise becomes less tolerable, chaos becomes less tolerable. Maybe, whereas before you might have gone to the TV to zone out, now you just want to get rid of the TV so that you can be more present. Um, pull out the paper and pen. If you've been a journaler, a person who journals, practice with putting some new things on the page. Explore what you've been writing in a new way. If you're new to journaling, just start with some bullet points. Write down some feelings. Get some thoughts on page. It's a magical way when what's going on in here lands on the page, and whether it's not so much about goals, it's about just getting thoughts and things on the page to unscramble them and then see what's actually happening inside you. And then one of my favorite things really about finding your feet and falling in love with space, and this is kind of an interesting exercise, and that's to play with space like it's an entity of its own. So for example, whenever two people meet, that's two energies, and there's a third energy created, right? This energy between you two. Well, if you learn to play with space like that, you can look at the space in your life, the things that are falling away, maybe the relationships that aren't feeling real congruent anymore. You play with the space that you see between that, and unload what you don't want in the space anymore. Let the space be there, and put in what you do want. There's a longer version to that, but that's the basics of it. Is you start playing with space like an entity, and freeing what's in there that you no longer want, and put in what you do. Do you have anything to add, Michael?
I would just say that when I was in this phase, I can distinctly remember 5 years ago when I was in this phase. Um, I was in between my corporate jobs. I had this gap where I did some entrepreneurial things, and so I was very much in between my corporate life, and I just got a basic job to get back on my feet. And during that time that I had that basic job, I just had this overwhelming feeling that I was reinventing my life for something new. And I didn't have an idea of what it was going to look like yet, but I knew, and part of it was because of our coaching together, that I just needed to continue to take things one step at a time. But I knew I needed to literally clear out and make space for new everything to come in. And so I
Mm-hmm.
cleared out stuff. I made space for something new. I mean, Craigslist was my friend. I got really good at selling stuff on Craigslist. So literally was cleaning out stuff that no longer served me, that I didn't love, and anything that I felt wasn't serving me, I just got rid of it. And that meant habits, that meant some friends that no longer supported and served me, that meant TV. I sold my TV and I got rid of cable for close to probably 3 years. Um, so I really did see this finding your feet as more of a, I just got a job to support me, and I cleared out a lot of stuff to make space for something new and better to show up in my life. And I did
Yeah.
really have an urge to fall back into some of the old ways that I used to do things because that was familiar. But through coaching and I guess just having a more conscious approach, I really resisted that urge to fall back into the old ways that I used to do things before. And I really started to I'm a I need to move a lot. And so I began moving this excess energy that I was starting to get through running. And as I started running during this time, longer distances and hiking and yoga, and I just really had to move that energy during this phase because it's kind of like this phase where you're in between the dying phase, and you're not quite in this other phase of reinventing and moving forward. So it can kind of be a tricky phase. because you can fall back
Mhm.
or you can push forward. And to know how to push forward is pretty critical. So those are some of the things that I did in this finding your feet phase.
Mhm.
Anything else from you on this one, Shelley?
No, I think that's key. And well, one thing I would emphasize is that all of this is obviously about moving through reinvention consciously. And if you want to bring a wholehearted work into the world, it's about getting conscious and getting present to your life, so that you're drawing out who you are. And that's the opportunity you have in reinvention. And
Yeah,
that's what these 5 phases are all about.
yeah. All right. Moving along to the next phase. Phase three is life reimagined. And for me, this phase was was so welcome. And it was so welcome because for those of us who have control issues and just want to do things, those past two phases are about like letting go and doing less, doing nothing even. And
Yeah.
I never realized how important that was until I got conscious of it and actually realized that by letting go, I could move through these parts of my life into
Mhm.
reinventing it to something better. So phase three is where you actually you get to kind of start to move forward a little bit. And this is
Mhm.
the part, this is the phase when a part of you knows that um, you're going to start getting ideas about reorganizing the remnants of your old identity into something new altogether. And you know you're beginning this phase three when your mind's eye starts seeing images of the life that you are about to create. And so you start getting a lot of interesting ideas. And this, again, this is like dissolving. It cannot be forced. This is a phase where things start to show up for you and did for me in a big way. I was living when I had my big shift, I call it, 5 years ago. I was living in Bend, Oregon at the time, and I started having images of living in Portland again. I lived in Portland before. I also had images of coaching, and I'd never really, I mean, I had paid to coach, but I had images of doing it for myself, and I didn't understand why. I just knew that somehow it was coming, and you'll see how this unfolds here as we go along. But I just started having these images of new things that I hadn't considered before. And so in this phase, you're really becoming that new person, developing new traits, new interests, and that old self is slowly starting to fade away. So in this phase, you might feel compelled to change things about your life, your routines, your habits. The old order of things simply seems wrong. And you begin reordering your outer situations to reflect your inner reinvention. So for me, instead of my life being about working a lot of hours and acquiring stuff and having a big nice house and new cars and working to make a lot of money, I had these images and ideas of serving in a new way in my work and starting fresh again. And so some of the things to do in this phase I've got on the screen is this is a point in my life where I started to, you can call it taking quiet time or meditating or whatever, but I just started taking quiet time at the start of every day and I started writing my ideas down. So I didn't just sit and like close my eyes and meditate. I actually sat in a quiet place and I wrote these ideas. I let ideas come through me. And I really
Mhm.
saw myself as a magnet for ideas to flow through me and to find me. And the more these ideas started coming, the more excited I got about the possibilities of what this reinvention of my life could look like. Other things that some people like to do in this phase are just spend time daydreaming. Again, we're not talking about a lot of action in this phase, but things just starting to move. A lot of people
Mhm.
create vision boards. That's something that can happen out of this phase. Starting to put the visions you're having, like physically put them together, um, and notice everything around you that catches your eye, and write it down. I had
Mhm.
journals all over the house at this phase of my life. I took journals to work. I took journals on the bus, and I was just writing stuff down all the time, ideas, and taking notice of things. So be open to new ideas. Read. This is a phase where I started to read blogs and books, but not for going somewhere specifically, just for the pure enjoyment of it. Because again, I was in
Mhm.
this really creative phase, and I began to follow those creative hunches and visions, and my imagination just felt like it was on fire. I just felt like there was so much moving and coming through me that was new. It was literally like being reinvented. And
Mhm.
and in this phase, for me, the most important thing was um, really just thinking from the perspective of I'm not trying to create anything in this phase. I'm just letting stuff come to me. Creative
Yeah.
ideas. I don't know what I'll do with them, but I'm just going to let
Mhm.
them come and flow and listen. And it's a really, I guess, a playful phase to be in is the best way I would describe it.
Mhm.
And it's a place where you really start to feel like impulses to maybe move things into action, but not actually to move them into action yet.
Mhm.
Shelley, what about you for this phase? What do you find are things that are helpful to do in this phase?
Yeah, well, I see this phase as definitely where peace, like where before it was flickers of peace, now the peace is fanning out,
Hmm.
and awe is something you start to feel. I start to feel in this phase, and you realize that you're actually where you want to be. Whereas before you've been through the dying and the finding your feet, you may not like where you are. You're maybe not quite sure about some of the things that have been going on. And when you got to this point, you're looking around and you're saying, I really want to be here. I really like where I am, even though you don't get it all yet. And
Yeah,
you realize you don't want anymore what you thought you wanted. So there's this sense of awe that starts to come in.
yeah.
And a client of mine is a great example of that because she had been honed in on this certain way of doing business and honed in on this particular relationship. And as she was getting totally clear of all the reasons she'd held on to those ideas, I think just really opened up for her. I mean, yeah, in the material world, money wise and other ways like that, but also very from the inside out. And she had options, and she stands in a level of awe, whereas before she was pretty contracted into how she thought things needed to be. And for myself too. And so I totally second what you said about noticing. What I've done is in different phases of my life, and actually I keep a big piece of butcher paper on my door all the time, but for to capture ideas and stuff. But that's whereas I was keeping it, maybe I'm a writer, so I fill journals, but um, whereas it might have taken me a year at one point, it started speeding up until I was filling one in a couple of months, or a month, and a thick journal would be filled because there's so much flowing through. And again, it's none of this is ever a time of to grasp things or sort of grip onto it and hold on. It's those allowing those creative sparks to come through and to land somewhere. So they get to land on a piece of paper on your door. They get to land in a journal. And in the relationships that have been changing, it's important to have conscious conversation so that these ideas also have a place to land. Um, with people who are connected within themselves enough to not just blow off your ideas or maybe treat them superficially, but say they can be there like, yeah, they're really there. It's a different kind of support um, that starts to feed your passion again. And again, it's not a passion that you're grasping onto. And you can be anywhere on the continuum of compassion, and that can mean you're just playing with curiosity, to feed it little by little. It can mean that your passion is starting to fire up, more heavily. But again, you're letting the creative sparks fly and giving a place to land. And one of the best ways to do that too is play. And play is this again. It's back to the studies that have been going on. By the way, the author of that book is Stuart Brown. In case anybody's wondering, he's an MD who has done years of study, and he gives the different categories where people find themselves along the different kinds of play that feed them. And for me, I have to move. I'm kinesthetic, so in one way or another, I'm going to be running in this phase. Um, well, I think throughout. I mean, I somewhere in there I started racing and doing different things, hiking in different ways, and um, sprinting, quite a few years ago, and finding ways to play. I'm also an explorer. I'm a storyteller. Finding ways to play that feeds you, because this phase, life reimagined, you're creating a context, and context is all about possibility. And even though you're not really engaging the full possibility until phase 5, here you're creating the context for possibility and allowing it to unfold.
Great. I almost forgot to tell the story of the example of this applying to my work situation. So I'll tell that real quick. I
Uh-huh.
was This was the phase where I I really had this strong idea that I wanted to do coaching somehow. And I was living, as I said, in Bend, Oregon at the time, and I had a couple of friends come over to visit from Portland. And I said I had these visions of moving back to Portland too. And so these friends asked me what I thought I was going to do next in my life as I was moving forward. And I said, you know what? I think I'm going to move to Portland and I kind of want to coach. And this one friend said, oh, well, I've got this job at a company in Portland and I coach adult college students for a living. You should apply. And so I applied for that job, and within a month, I I moved to Portland and I got that job. So
Mhm.
it was cool to see how reinventing my work was beginning to really unfold and flow in this really easy, almost like ridiculously effortless way. It felt like because I'd always been
Mhm.
about pushing, pushing, pushing to make things happen. And here I was finding myself just, things started to flow. Like,
Mhm.
I had the vision and then someone's in front of me with this possibility to make things happen. So I just wanted to drop that in terms of how it applied to my work life.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to move along to the next slide for phase 4. Take it away, Shelley.
Well, phase 4 is where things you start to make it real. And again, we're going to emphasize one more time, it's not about grasping onto anything. It's really about letting it happen. And yet your things are starting to take form in a bigger way. And you'll find in this phase, uh, you may still find like a cycle of stagnation and forward movement, stagnation and opening, because there may still be some old parts of your life dying while other things are opening up. So, for example, client is going through that right now, and I mean she's really in touch with what her brilliance is now, and she has some pretty clear ideas of how to bring it forward. Still kind of scared about it. Some awesome things happening in the level of clients that are walking through her door that she has not done cold calling. She's not gone and done the footwork like she used to. They're showing up out of the blue. It's coming to her, and there's this kind of process of the stagnation of something else that needs to die and fall away as she gets used to her new self and this new business and the thing that she's really enjoying creating. So that's very much happening in phase 4. If you're in business, your new branding is going to start to take form in this phase, um, and you're getting clear on your new clientele. And one of the big ways to understand that is that you're discovering who you walked your path to serve. And it's not about an ideal client list anymore. I mean, it's coming from a pretty deep connection with who you are and why you walked your path and who you get to, what do you get to create in the world as a result of that. It's You're getting connected with your true values, and you've moved out of the cocoon. Your new vision's taking shape. You're trying out your new wings. You're shaking off the goo from the cocoon, right? And you're getting your wings moving, and you're feeling into a new rhythm. So like I mentioned that sense of stagnation opening, because you're trying, you have come through this whole huge thing, and there's the proverbial butterfly, caterpillar cocoon butterfly idea. Um, and it is like that. And your wings need to kind of feel what it feels like to have the air moving through them. And so you're playing with that. What to do? Strategies in this phase. I have to emphasize play again. Find ways to play, because play really does shape your brain. It rejuvenates the body. It obviously rejuvenates the soul. And play in particular, it doesn't have um, a, a forced goal in mind per se. So it's the difference between, even in a game where there's a contest going on, you know, the idea of play is, okay, you won, okay, let's play again. You want to keep it going. It's not to end the game and have a win-lose situation. The goal is to play. So find ways to play. And if you um, I'm very physical, so lots of times when I'm going for a hike, I'm not always just paying attention to the trees. I like to really get a workout in, but I'm conscious of that. And there will be other days where I'm walking and I make sure I'm taking it all in. And that's the thing, is that you're coming to it consciously in the way that you play. There's a new body of work taking form. If you're moving from a corporate setting into your own creative brainchild, if you're in a business already, and so there's a new body of work that's starting to take form, and you get to start making it real in this place. Your intentions have shifted, so you're starting to put them concretely out there. Whereas everything has been the creative sparks started coming through in the last phase. Here, it's starting to take form. Again, you're not pushing it, you're not gripping it, and you're playing with it, and you're having fun with what's moving through you. Um, and your trust is building. And I think even more, you're starting to put things in pictures. You mentioned the vision board last time in the last phase, Michael, and I would say here, in phase 4, you're really starting to crave more physical reminders. So physical things around you that emphasize where you are. So whereas before you've gone through the cleaning of the slate, you're kind of feeling into some new relationships, things of letting things fall away, and that fight in the phase 3, some new people are coming in. Here, you're really getting to make the new relationships have a lot more form to it. You're enjoying it, and putting your ideas, and your ideas might take shape into something, even starting your business here.
Yeah. For me, this is the phase where I stopped fantasizing about things, about the ideas, and I started to make them real. And this
Mm-hmm.
this is a phase where, well, I'd interviewed for the coaching job that I referenced a while back, and this is the phase where when I moved into this phase, I knew the job was mine. I just had to go through the steps of interviewing. It was almost like working it backwards. I knew I already had the job, but I just had to do the interviews and so forth. And I've spent some time in this phase. This has been a good phase for me, for my work, because this is the phase where I interviewed for the coaching job and I got that. This is really a phase where, if you're a new artist, this is the time you might begin submitting your work to galleries, or if you've been reading blogs, maybe this is the phase where you actually start your own blog. It's about taking that creative energy and moving it into the real world. Um, I was in this phase, like I said, for a while, specifically for my work. I accepted the coaching job. I got a year's worth of experience. I get paid to coach. I got to coach people 5 days a week and get paid for it. This is also the phase where I very deliberately decided I'm going to go back into software sales on my terms, and I'm going to define what that job's going to look like. And I'm going to leverage my skills to do work that comes easy to me and get paid good money for it, in order to build a good, solid financial foundation to create something more. I didn't know what it was going to be again, because the part about reinvention is that you're reinventing and you're trusting in the steps that you're taking.
Mhm.
So I took that software job, and then this is also the phase where, a couple of years into that job, I started paying attention to, gosh, you know what? I think I want to start my own blog. So about a year and a half ago, I started a simple blog, and I began coaching people on the side. And while I was still working full time in my corporate software job. And this is the phase where I started my web show and my podcast. So this is a phase where the ideas just start to like move and actually happen. And
Mhm.
I like to point out too that Shelley mentioned this, but this is the phase where you try things on for size. You don't necessarily like get an idea and say, okay, this is the thing I'm going to do for the next 10 years. This is the phase where you get an idea and you say, this feels kind of good. I'm going to experiment with this. This isn't a forever decision. I'm going to try it on and see how it fits. And this is also a phase where I've learned that, things just don't happen in a straight line. Um, so with these experiments that you try, the things that I tried, my blogging, my coaching on the side, my web show, the different jobs I took, like oftentimes I had to go back to phase 3, kind of go back to the drawing board a little bit to kind of reinvent them a little bit to get them to the place where they felt good again. So don't be afraid to revisit phase 3 to adjust your dreams and plans to include the truths that are continuing to emerge as you reinvent yourself and your job and your work in the world. And then
Absolutely.
persist. Know that you're meant to be doing great things and keep going. Because I've had coaching clients that hit this phase and they're like, oh, things aren't working out. So I guess I'm not meant to do it. And that's not it at all. You may just need to like circle back around and adjust how the thing you're bringing into the world is looking and functioning to get it up to speed with who you're becoming as a person, right? And then keep going and keep going and keep taking those baby steps. So my philosophy for like phase 4 is just like keep pushing, not pushing. That's my old way of thinking. Keep moving, keep moving forward
Good catch.
and re-implementing your new and improved plans until they work.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I'd add to that. I'm glad you mentioned going back to phase three because I'm going to mention that in phase type five as well. But that, you know, how you have walked through phases one and two, in terms of cleaning out and playing with the space. By the time you get to phase four, you've got some new people in your life, some kind of new wisdom. It can take so many different forms that are really present. There's a phrase called sort of up underneath you, real life support. Like when, after a sports game, you're up on somebody's shoulders, or, it's like you're truly supported in a new way because you've got something new to bring into the world. And so, and it's not about going out and looking to find them, like we've talked about. It's not about pushing. It's more about walking through these phases, playing with the space, letting the space be there, and they will show up. If you trust the space, it will show up. And then by the time you get to phase four, and it, Michael, I definitely have experienced that. I was just amazed, at what had showed up in my life, to support me in moving forward.
Yeah. All right, phase 5, embracing the flow. And I just want to do a quick time check here. It's 5 o'clock on the West Coast here, and we've gone an hour, and I would suspect that we'll go another 15 minutes. So if you can, hang tight with us, and we'll wrap this thing up. Phase
Okay.
5 is embracing the flow, and this, my friends, is is a good phase. It's a good place to be because it's the time when your new identity is starting to really come together and you're able to soar, to fly. And it's what I like to refer to as the cycle of rest and play. And there's a coach out there, her name is Martha Beck. She's very well known, and she has used this example in many of her writings and teachings. And she uses the infinity symbol, which is like the figure 8, this cycle of rest and play. And to
Oh,
her,
my board back.
when you're doing your greatest work in the world, it literally feels like play. So you're moving between
Mhm.
these cycles of rest and play. And so that's now how I think about creating my work. Like, am I in a cycle of rest and play? And there's not even the word work in there. So this is the place where you start to move into that and
Mm.
find your groove, so to speak. um, and it's where the magic starts to happen, and it's where you're really implementing self-trust that you've built into driving yourself forward and seeing great stuff happening. And so really the things to do in this phase are enjoy it. I mean, you deserve it. You've just come through a pretty scary and dramatic transformation if you've gone through this cycle of reinvention. So you deserve very much to savor this new identity a little bit. And one thing I do in this phase, I feel like honestly right now I'm kind of between phases 4 and 5 with my new work. I'm kind of just still finding my wings and figuring out different ways that I want to do things in my business. But I spend time every day in gratitude. I'll whip out my little gratitude journal and I'll just write some stuff in there that's going really well. And I'm not super like disciplined about write 3 things or 2 things or whatever. I just open it and I pay a lot of attention to what's gone right and what's going good. And this is
Mhm.
also a phase where I see it as a phase where it's important to make small improvements. You're not trying to like make these huge shifts in this phase necessarily. You're course correcting. You're finding little ways to make your new life a little bit more pleasurable. And that can be from a business sense too. Like one of the things I'm doing right now is looking for a VA, right? Because I want some help with some of the stuff that goes on, the everyday stuff, so I can spend more time in the creative space. It can mean, maybe getting a house cleaner for your house to free up time to, spend more time with your family. But from a work perspective, it oftentimes means just fine tuning things so that they run a little bit more smooth. Um, so that's the things that I would say are most important in this phase of embracing the flow. It's um, it's a great place to be. You never know how long you're going to be in it. I think we've all felt it, like in different jobs before, where gosh, we're just in the flow. It's like, man, the things are happening so easily, right? And then the
Mhm.
reason this is a cycle is because life changes. We change. And knowing how to reinvent ourselves in a conscious way is what I think gives me now a lot of confidence in being able to be okay with change and knowing
Yeah.
that I'm going to continue to move forward and use the things that I've learned to either know when to push forward or just sit back a little bit and know what to do in those different phases. Shelley, what about you? What's important for you in this phase?
Yeah. Well, I think first thing in this phase is it can feel like you don't even realize you're there, and you go and you kind of look around and you discover things are really flowing, and you get to settle in and enjoy the ride. And it is also a time, like you said, I think we get into flow, and you may find yourself then moving back through phases 3, 4, and 5 quite a bit. Flow, reimagine, taking form, flow, reimagine, taking form, flow, and it runs that way. And then the whole cycle at different times will run itself in terms of the dying and finding your feet and moving through. But I do find that the 3, 4, 5 kind of take their cycle because things are flowing and you're reimagining. So you're playing with these. You're sort of taking the opportunities that are coming in and you're flowing with them. There's a magnetism going on. One of the things I like to remind people of is that anxiety or fear and excitement run on the same channels in the body. So whereas in the dying phase and finding your feet and some of those earlier phases, you're probably feeling a lot of fear. Um, One of the things to remind yourself is as that's dissolving is that it's really safe to feel happy again, and to feel and maybe your reinvention phase you don't go through something quite that dramatic, but I do want to say it for those who are and do and have is that to remind yourself that what you're feeling may actually be excitement and not anxiety and not fear, and let it flow, especially in this phase. And this is also the phase where, like, if you're as an athlete, you and the racket feel like one, or as a writer, you and the pen feel like one, you and the keyboard, whatever your medium is, you and the microphone. That this is that place where you feel that flow and enjoy it. Again, don't get attached to it. Keep your hand open so that you can move through the phases to reimagine and let things take form and come back through and stay and be in the flow.
Yeah. One of the things that I guess I am most grateful for in having gone through this cycle of reinvention and knowing it is I no longer really attribute my happiness to like being in phase 5 or 4 or whatever. My security and I guess happiness is lies in knowing how to deal with reinvention and how to whenever it occurs, like how to move through this cycle without getting stuck. Because I used to get stuck all the time. I didn't even know it because I didn't know about this cycle. I didn't know how to deal with it. I didn't know any of it. So I just spent a lot of time being frustrated and mad and upset and all that. But now that I know how to move through this cycle and embrace flow and reinvent aspects of my career and my job and how to move that forward, it gives me a lot of confidence and a lot of courage to take risks that used to feel really, really scary.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, Shelley, any final thoughts on the cycle of reinvention?
Yeah, one final thought, and that's on the subject of trust.
Mm-hmm.
Trust, even though we haven't actually used that word much throughout these phases, it's an intrinsic part of this whole cycle of reinvention. So, at some level, wherever you are on the continuum of what you experience in your reinvention, your trust is going to feel pretty shaken in life, in the first phases, and and that's okay. You can let it fall away. You hear the phrases like "this too shall pass," and those are all true. And um, you're shedding one level of trust to be able to move into a whole another level of trust. And life really does come to you. Life really does show up for you. And reinvention is, if you make it as juicy as possible, is discovering that kind of trust.
I love it. Well said. All right, I'm going to move to the next slide. So,
Okay.
let me check the time. Okay, we're at about 5, 10 minutes, 12 minutes after 5. So, to wrap up today, what we want to do is make an offer to go deeper with Shelley and
Mhm.
I. We are offering a 7-week training program called Raising the Bar, Embracing Your Wholehearted Work in the World. And we're going to start this course April 2nd, and it's going to go 7 weeks through May 14th. And it's going to be conducted much like this. It's going to be a live webinar training session with Q&A and laser coaching every other week. The
Yeah.
cost is going to be $297. That's the early bird rate. At March 19th, it goes to $397. And you can see if you're viewing the slides, there's a website there, theselfconnection.com/raising the bar. And for those of you on the phone, I'll say that again. Just go to theselfconnection.com/raising the bar. And you can see all the information on the program. And I was figuring this out, Shelley, just before the call, actually, because we wanted to make this program accessible to as many people as we possibly can. It's
Yeah.
tremendous value, and we're super excited about going deep with people to really
Mhm.
figure out how to move forward with their wholehearted work in the world. And Shelley, I figured it out, and 297. Um,
Mhm.
this is over 12 hours of our best work, so it's like $25 an hour. And I know my rate is like 175 an hour, and I know yours is higher than that. And people are going to be getting us together.
Yeah.
So it from my perspective a very accessible point, and we're so excited. This is the first time we've
We
ever worked together, and
Yeah.
I'll let Shelley give some input here while I move to the next slide and show you guys uh, what you
What's
would
in it?
get.
Yeah. Yeah, we've been getting a lot of requests of, this kind of content, ways to engage that, you know, take that it gets a bigger picture. And this is an opportunity. We're, like Michael said, we're going off and on. One week is going to be full of content, what it's like to stepping into the light, really getting connected with what you care about. Another week is about freeing your brilliance. We're definitely going to be, addressing transforming your wounds into wisdom, because there's no wholehearted work if you don't do that. And owning your authority, which has nothing to do with running out to get to the next degree and so forth. It's really settling into um, who you are and bringing that into the world, and any kind of training you want to get comes after, and and so much more. It's all there on the website. This will be, and that's my website, theselfconnection.com. This will eventually be up on both mine and Michael's website, so you'll be able to register at both places. For tonight, and this it's accessible here. You do receive gifts from both of us for registering. And like Michael said, play is the word here. We're having a lot of fun. I absolutely love walking through people through the reinvention, freeing their brilliance into what they're here to do, what they love to do in the world. So I would love to see you there. We both would.
Absolutely. What else, Shelley? I guess if you guys
I
have
think,
questions,
yeah,
type your
Q&A.
type your questions into the panel and I can see them, or you can just raise your hand and I can unmute you and you can talk through the computer on your microphone or on your phone. So if there's any questions, now's the time to ask. But we're super excited about bringing this. Um, Someone's got a question there, it looks like. So I'm going to unmute that line. I can't tell who it is. Oh, somebody just said excellent presentation. Thank you very much.
Cool.
Let me unmute this person and see. Okay, someone else is asking what time.
For the 7-week course,
Oh,
that'll be
what
at the
what
same.
time are the live events? What time are the
Yeah.
live events? So I didn't discuss this with you, Shelley, yet, but I think this is still open for debate. I
Mhm.
had a lot of people get back to me today to say, 4 o'clock's just not a good time for us people here on the West Coast.
Oh, I see.
and and so I guess the short answer for now is we don't know. I'm thinking maybe noon, but we're still trying to decide what that is. If there's anybody that has preference, feel free to type that in.
Yeah, yeah, because we had planned the same time as this call, but if you're getting some feedback like that, yeah, then we can move it to noon. So it'd be a noon on the West Coast, and then 3 on the East Coast, right? One, two, yeah.
Yeah. So I guess that's not really an answer because we don't know yet, but I'm leaning towards making it more accessible to people on the West Coast since most of my
Mhm.
clients are on the West Coast.
Mine are kind of everywhere, so
Okay.
I'd like to hear feedback, but I'm open to, yeah, seeing what people say. Otherwise, that time will be firmed up very soon.
Yeah. So there's a question coming in here that I'm going to just unmute them so that we can hear. Okay.
Okay.
I've just unmuted someone. So if you raised your hand with a question and you want to ask that question, go ahead and ask it now. No, I am not hearing it. Okay, I've got one more question that just came in. I'm going to go ahead and answer that. If one works, those times are too early for the other side of the USA. So there's somebody on the East Coast that's expressing um, their preference.
That noon is too early?
Yeah,
Okay. My sense is we need to just go with the 4 o'clock time, or possibly move it to 5 o'clock for the on the West Coast,
yeah,
and and then roll with it.
yeah. we all of the sessions will be recorded like this, but part of the benefit of this is, there's going to be 3 sessions that are going to be live laser coaching and
Yeah.
Q&A sessions. So, we definitely want to get a time that works best for people. We can't please everyone, but we want to try to please as many people as possible.
Can we have those who are on the call right now, who are interested in taking it, tell us where you are, which time zone you're in and what time works for you, so we have something to work with
Yeah,
and
sure.
make a decision and get it on the page right away.
Yeah, that's a good idea. So for those of you that
Yeah.
are there, if you can just type into the GoToWebinar panel where you're from and the preferred time if you're interested in the course.
Yeah, be specific about your time zone.
Okay, interested but not decided. West Coast, 4 p.m. works on Tuesdays.
Okay. Are there any other questions coming in? Either?
Let's see. Yeah, let me unmute somebody here that has a question. Bear with me, guys. This is new technology. It's really
How
cool.
many things can you do at once, Michael?
See, I'm not a good multitasker. Someone else should be doing this. I'm going to unmute someone. Okay, I have just unmuted somebody that wanted to ask a question. So if you want to ask, give it a shot.
Are you there? You can't see their name.
No, a lot of these registrations that came in come in as friend. So it's like, okay, I'm going to try somebody else. Okay,
Okay.
someone else is asking
Someone
a
else is
question.
asking a question.
Can you hear me?
If you have a question, just speak up, and even if you're all at once, we'll try to filter out who it is. Sounds like somebody typing in the background.
There's definitely some rumbling out there.
Okay.
All right.
They're not saying anything. So anybody else?
That's the only feedback I've gotten back.
Okay.
Is West Coast person 4 p.m. works on Tuesdays. And someone else was saying if one works a full-time job, those times are too early for the other side of the country. So you know what? We're going to do our best to get a time that works well for the greatest number of people.
And let's say it's going to be up by Friday.
Yeah, we'll have it up by Friday. And there's going to be a replay of this webinar too. So everybody who registered on GoToWebinar is going to get a replay of this within 24 hours.
Yeah.
Okay. Any closing thoughts from you, Shelley?
I say thank you everyone for coming, and we will have a solid time out, if not by Friday before, and look forward to seeing you in the 7-week program.
Yeah, thanks
Thanks
for
for being here.
thanks very much, everyone. Appreciate your time. Hopefully, you were able to walk away with knowing exactly where you stand in that cycle of reinvention and having some practical steps to move forward through those phases. Appreciate your time. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh, hi, Shelley.
Hi, who is that?
This is Jen Wilson. I talked to you yesterday on the phone.
Oh, great. Do you have a question?
I don't. Thank you.
Oh, okay. You're
Bye,
welcome.
much.
Hi.
Bye-bye.
Your wife is the best woman ever. I love her. Bye, y'all. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.